It's DJ Scream from iHeartRadio 96.1. The Beat, the DJ Scream Show welcomes a close friend of mine, U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff is here. How you doing, my brother?
DJ Scream, great to see you. I'm well. Hello, everybody. This is your Senator Jon Ossoff. It's a pleasure to serve you.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. You've been keeping your word, working really hard for your supporters. Some of the things that you ran on, and some of the issues that you said that you were going to tackle. You've been really getting after it. And I know that recently, something that's been in the media and that your campaign has been talking about a lot is the bipartisan path forward to ban stock trading for Congress members. Talk to us a little bit about why that's important and where we are with making progress on that.
So, folks might remember, and good morning again, everybody. This is your Senator Jon Ossoff. Folks might remember that there was a lot of controversy about two U.S. senators who used to represent Georgia
Yeah.
and their aggressive stock trading around the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is not an isolated case. We've seen members of Congress aggressively trading stock across the country. And the bottom line is that there's a serious risk of corruption associated with this practice. Members of Congress, members of the Senate like me, members of the House, we are making policy. We're regulating industries. We have access to privileged and confidential and classified information. We should not be playing the stock market while doing this job. And it doesn't matter if folks are Republicans, independents, Democrats, unaffiliated. Almost everybody agrees with this, that members of Congress shouldn't be trading stock. So when I was elected, I introduced legislation called the Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act to try to end this practice. And we had a breakthrough last week. We now have a bipartisan agreement, meaning we have some Democratic senators, some Republican senators who have agreed on a framework to move forward and try to pass legislation that will ban members of Congress from trading stock and end this corrupt practice.
And let me talk to you. I think last time we spoke about this as well. How important is it in our political landscape for there to be bipartisan efforts? Because everybody knows on different sides of the spectrum, people have like they're tied to what they believe in and they want to push what they believe in. But as a country, we all want our country to be a better place. How important is it for those bipartisan efforts to push forward?
It's critical. First of all, just as a matter of practical reality, if you want to get things done when the balance of power in Congress is so tight, all right, like right now, the U.S. House is controlled by Republicans. The U.S. Senate is controlled by Democrats. In both cases, by very narrow margins. If you want to actually do things and not just talk about things,
Right.
then you have to build consensus. You have to build consensus. Otherwise, you can say all the right things on TV and social media, and you can demonstrate to everybody that you're on the right side of the issues, but you're not going to get anything done. And I was elected to get things done, not just to talk. So, for example, on this ban on congressional stock trading, we have to build support in both political parties for it.
Right.
The prison reform legislation that I just passed, it passed because I was able to build support in both political parties. Other thing I would just note on this is, and I think a lot of elected officials and activists and political party people don't get it. Most people, doesn't matter their age, their demographics, their beliefs, don't walk around all day and get up in the morning identifying as a Democrat or as a Republican. It's not the center of life and identity for most people. And we're so trapped right now in this partisan thinking among the political class and elected officials where it's all about political party. And that just really doesn't resonate with most people.
Do you think that some of that we don't know for sure, but may have occurred with obviously the unfortunate incident of the assassination attempt the other day? That did you think that some people are taking their political affiliations and their beliefs too far and not focusing on, again, the efforts of just making our country a better place for ourselves, our families, and our children?
Look, obviously a horrific and terrifying event. Somebody was killed, two people grievously wounded. The former president was injured. we don't yet know what the motive of the shooter was in this case, but clearly the risk of political violence in the country right now is elevated. And, we saw the January 6th attack on the US Capitol after the last election. We saw lots of threats against election officials and election workers here in Georgia and across the country because of conspiracy theories about the elections. Now we've seen this appalling attempt on the life of the former president. It's out of hand, and we've got to turn down the temperature because we're really at risk of tearing ourselves apart as a people. There's a lot that we can do that serves the people's interest, that doesn't require one political party or the other to win everything. We have to find ways to work together.
Well, I speak to a lot of youth, and I go around the city just talking to a lot of youth, pouring into our youth. That's very important. They're our future, and a lot of them have asked me a question that I don't know. A lot of them have just made the age of 18, so they have the right to go out and vote. And I've also been telling them to pay attention to what's going on locally, as far as like local politicians and who represents your needs and what you need to accomplish. But a lot of them feel really discouraged about the national campaign and what to do. They don't know what to do. Like they feel like they're not being heard, their voice is not being heard, and they just feel lost. Like I finally get to vote, but I don't really know what to do. If somebody's in limbo in that weird space as a young person, what would you advise that they do in that situation?
Let me try to break it down like this. Questions as simple as, is the water I'm drinking coming to me through a pipe made of lead and therefore poisoning me? Depend upon voting. Questions as simple as, does the town I live in have high-speed internet or not? Does my side of town get invested in to build parks, to upgrade transportation options so folks can get to and from work and to and from the grocery store? These things depend on voting. We passed legislation, it was the infrastructure law, and it may not be controversial and it may not lead the news, but this is why lead pipes are being removed from drinking water systems. I mean, what is more fundamental than the question of whether you or your child or your auntie or your cousin is drinking poison water? And we see, for example, in Flint, Michigan, or the recent example in Mississippi, or even what happened on the south side of the city of Atlanta recently, that something as seemingly mundane as water infrastructure is actually life or death. So if you're watching the national political debate and not connecting with it, then what I encourage folks to recognize is that these things that impact our daily lives, like, is my street paved? Is my water safe?
The basics.
These are about who represents us, where resources are allocated, and whether you are a priority. And if you do not vote, politicians will not make you a priority. So this is how young people and all of us exercise power and demand representation in our system.
The federal prison oversight bill is so imperative that even though prisoners, as they're going through prison reform, that their civil rights aren't violated, their safety and their living conditions aren't violated. Talk to us a little bit about what inspires you to push that initiative forward.
Well, talk about people who don't have representation or power, incarcerated people. I mean, people with power in society, be they elected officials or otherwise, don't care about people who are behind bars. Because people who are behind bars don't have money, they don't have power, they oftentimes are unable to vote even after they're released. And that's why we have this civil rights crisis that is unfolding behind bars across the country at every level, federal, state, and local. People know what's been happening in the Fulton and Clayton County jails. They see what's happening in our state prison system, where you've got violence and corruption running rampant. And it's happening in the federal prison system too. One investigation that I led found that in 2/3, DJ Scream, 2/3 of federal prisons that housed female inmates had been sexually assaulted by members of the prison staff.
Wow.
At one prison, by the warden and the chaplain.
Mm.
So I wrote this legislation. It's called the Federal Prison Oversight Act, and I've now passed it through the Senate and the House. It's on its way to the president for his signature, and it revolutionizes how we inspect and oversee federal prisons. My legislation will ensure that there are routine, ongoing inspections, independent inspections of every single federal prison facility. It will create a new office dedicated to investigating civil rights abuses and reports of abuse in federal prisons. It will create a new confidential hotline for inmates and their families and their lawyers to report complaints and allegations of abuse. And this is not just an idea that I have. This is now passed the Congress, and it will become law very soon.
Two more questions for you, Senator Ossoff. Another thing that's near and dear to the heart of the youth is just feeling safe in the world, feeling safe in their schools. And we saw that we've seen mass shootings in the United States, particularly one that happened at a school that was heartbreaking. And a lot of the youth feel like it happened and we moved past it without really a course of action that solves the problem or makes our kids feel safe in these schools. Um, what is the Senate, Congress, everybody like? Is this something that's still on the table? Like we have a gun crisis in our country. I think that like you said, is not at the top of the media headlines every day, but we have a gun crisis, and when we look at the statistics, they are very alarming. They're very disheartening. But what is this, the Senate, the Congress, and just the bipartisan parties as a whole doing to correct this issue?
Well, look, one small piece of progress that we made is we passed a law called the Safer Communities Act, which, when a background check is conducted at the point of sale for a firearm, folks under 21, that there's a real look at juvenile criminal history or disciplinary issues in school to make sure that somebody doesn't pose a threat, hasn't been identified, someone who to their classmates and pick up a high-powered rifle. And we've seen that that has interrupted some attempted weapons purchases by people who may pose a threat to their classmates or may have intention to harm people at school or otherwise. The other thing that I've worked to do is to try to make sure that there's the resources in the community to provide mental health counseling to young people. In the state of Georgia, for example, for every 6,000 children in school, there's only one mental health professional in school. So we passed a law so that local school districts can hire more mental health support for kids in school.
So we know, as a senator, listen, you're doing an amazing job. Like we said earlier, you're really keeping your word as far as the issues that you wanted to tackle when you were campaigning. And the question that comes to my particular text message a lot that I have to ask you is, when we look at when we look at the Democratic Party and we look at everybody who could potentially run for president, right? A lot of people feel like the talent pool isn't where it should be. A lot of people think that there's like a age gap that, creates some complication as far as communication with the people in the parties. Would you or have you considered potentially in the future running for office and president?
That is a very flattering question that I'm honored to be asked, DJ Scream, but I have no intention of doing that. I am entirely focused on my constituents in Georgia. I think that Georgians deserve the best. I try to bring that energy, that youthful perspective. I'm the youngest member of the U.S. Senate by a lot. I think the average age in the Senate is about 68 or 69 years old. I'm 37. I try to be that voice for the younger generation in the U.S. Senate, and I'm trying to do the best job I can for the state that elected me. But I agree with you, and I agree with so many young people that we need more young voices in politics, in elected office, that the conversation is dominated by, look, we revere and respect our elders, but there's got to be diversity of voices in power. And that's another reason why it's so important for young people to vote. If you want to see more young people in office, if you want more youth representation, if you want the young perspective to be part of the conversation, it's important that young people participate in the process.
Absolutely, 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 absolutely. I appreciate your time as always. You know, you're welcome on the platform anytime you need something to say to the people and you want to say something to the people. And, you know, I'm going to bring you the real questions from the people as well,
Always.
so we can always make progress and move forward.
I appreciate you, DJ Scream. And for anybody out there, if ever I can help you, it's ossoff.senate.gov. We help thousands of Georgians every month with all kinds of issues. Just reach out and we'll try to be of assistance. ossoff.senate.gov.
Much love to Senator Jon Ossoff stopping by the DJ Scream Show on 96.1 to be iHeartRadio. Salute.
Much love to you.
All right. Thank you, man.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
All right.